All right, welcome to this week's Changelog, where we talk about the changes on Solana week by week. Today I'm joined by Andy, and let's get started. So this past week there was a big hackathon announcement, Grizzlython. What you can do is you can actually enter in this hackathon, win great prizes. It's really the best way that you can get your project noticed on Solana. Let's jump into this week's proposal. So there's a new proposal, SIMD-22. It's the multi-stake delegation proposal. And what that means is kind of like there's a new way of doing stake accounts. You can actually have multiple delegators on a single stake account. And that allows you to have these small amounts of stake that could be less than the minimum stake delegation amount added to your stake account and merged a lot easier.
Can you tell us how it is at the moment as to how it will be if that proposal gets accepted?
Yeah, so today, if you wanted to add a stake delegation that's less than the current minimum stake delegation amount, today it's 1, but on testnet it's actually 1 SOL. What would happen is that you couldn't do it because you have to create a new stake account, you have to delegate to it, and then you have to redelegate to merge your stake accounts. So with this new multi-stake delegation proposal, you could actually do this with small stake and still merge your stake accounts. This helps with like liquidity issues. It helps with things of having just adding your small stake, just dust here and there to your stake accounts. And it really allows you to expand your stake accounts as you go versus having to wait for large stake to add.
So that's also quicker than if you were to use 2.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have to wait for the warm-up period because you wouldn't have to redelegate to another account, then redelegate again. It would actually be 1 versus 2.
All right. And what did you find as the resource of the week?
Yeah, so this week's resource of the week is known as Space Operator. So what Space Operator is a way to use different nodes to kind of teach Solana or learn Solana in a way. So say example, you have create NFT, you could use different nodes that could be like generate key pair or create mint account, and then so on to show someone who's new to learning Solana how to create an NFT, what happens under the hood.
And that's a very visual tool, so it's quite cool.
Yeah, super visual. And then what commits did you see this past week that were interesting?
So there was one commit that adds additional cost to the built-in programs, like the compute budget program, the address lookup table, and the BPF upgradable loader. They have been 0 before, and they now have a static cost for calling them.
So that means like, hey, if I make a transaction increasing my budget, I now will incur some small compute cost extra for doing that instruction, correct?
Exactly.
Cool.
There's been another commit that limits the maximum data loaded per transaction. There's now a fixed cap of 64 megabyte per transaction. So that will be the maximum data that you will be able to work with in one transaction. And that cap is large enough that it should not break anything right now, I assume.
Yep. I think it was Tao that did the commit, and what he did is or Rio, that looked at all the different ways that people load transactions today or the data on a transaction today, and the max was 64 megs, like the 99th percentile.
Right. Cool.
And then there was another commit that I saw for web3.js that kind of changed the return type for get fee for message. This was a minor release change. It was to match the current RPC implementation, but it could do some breaking changes if you have code out there, so just be aware of it.
Yeah, you just need to add that this is now nullable. Need to check for the null.
Correct. And then there's a few more things that happened this past week is that there's now a contributor access policy so that you can, as an outside contributor, gain either triage or possibly even write access to the Solana Labs repos, specifically SPL and the Solana monorepo.
That's pretty cool. You don't need to be part of Labs.
You don't need to be part of Labs. This change allows a lot of people that are outside contributors to possibly get that type of access and start helping with in kind of a more open source mentality.
Open source.
Yep. And then there's two more things that got moved out of the monorepo. So Web3.js and Explorer actually moved out of the monorepo, so you can find them today in their single individual repositories.
So we have new repos just for those two, the Web3.js and the Explorer?
Yes. And then you can use those. Now you can actually submit issues directly on Web3.js versus on the monorepo. It previously was a little bit confusing.
Right. Cool. That should make it more easy to use.
So that concludes our changes for this week. Join us next week. And thank you, Andy, for joining me on the changelog.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.